Okay, then down at the bottom, management of dehydration. That's due to malignancy or treatment. So the only one where they make a difference is that anemia. Because this is saying dehydration. We don't care if it was due to the malignancy or to the treatment of the malignancy, either through chemo or radiation or immunotherapy. Okay? So again, if you're focused, if you bring them in there and all you're doing is rehydrating them, then your principal diagnosis is dehydration. Okay? But if they're already in there and you discover they're dehydrated, then the neoplasm or whatever they were admitted for is first and dehydration is a second. Okay? So why were they admitted? What's the focus of treatment? And they give you an example at the bottom of the page. This is a guy that was under treatment for prostate cancer, and he's admitted for gross hematuria. Says the patient received 15 units of blood and they irrigated his bladder until the urine was cleared. So why was he admitted? He was admitted for the hematuria, right? So that goes first, then the neoplasm, and then of course your codes for blood transfusion and bladder irrigation.
Okay. So in a neoplasm, you code symptoms as like principal often? Because isn't this R code a symptom?
Yes, it is a symptom, and that's what makes it a little bit crazy. So you only are going to code those if that's what they're treating. Okay? Like we're not going to sit in there and code pain or tiredness or any of that you might have from a neoplasm. Only if we're going to treat it and do something about it. Okay. If the admission or encounter is for a complication resulting from a surgical procedure, then the complication is going to be the principal diagnosis if that's the focus of treatment. So again, you can see an example at the top of the next page on 461. Tells you that this guy has adenocarcinoma of the prostate, and we did an outpatient orchiectomy. Okay? However, we had to admit him because he had a post-operative urethral stricture. So that's why he's there, and that's why we admitted him, and our malignancy would be an additional code. Okay. So you kind of get a feel for that, when to code what.
You said the complications, the principal is what?
Well, that's why they were admitted.
Okay.
See, he was having outpatient surgery. He was going to go home, but we had to admit him because of this post-operative urethral stricture. So that's why he's being admitted, and that'll go first and then the neoplasm. Okay, then it gets back into a lot of this stuff we've actually already talked about. So this is, it tells you here that if the patient is admitted for surgery, like again, let's say this patient has breast cancer, and we admit them and we do the mastectomy, and then while they're in there, we start the chemo, okay? They're in there for the neoplasm, not for the chemo. So the principal diagnosis is going to be the neoplasm, and you won't even code the Z51 thing at all. You'll just show the chemo through a procedure code. Okay? But if they come in solely for chemo, radiation, or immunotherapy, then that's the Z51 codes. That's what you're seeing, Z51.0 for radiation, Z51.11 for chemotherapy, and Z51.12 for immunotherapy. Again, you're going to have an additional code for the neoplasm. And remember that as long as that cancer is being treated, it's coded as current. Even if we've already cut it off, like we cut off your breast. We did a prostatectomy. Whatever. As long as we're treating you with chemo or radiation, you're going to code that as a current cancer. Not history of. Okay? Now, you can use that additional code to show we did the surgery. You can use that acquired absence of breast or acquired absence of prostate, and then we know that, yeah, we've actually already removed it, but we're still treating it. Okay? Again, you would assign any codes for complications that develop during that stay. And then about in the middle of all that, it talks about tumor lysis syndrome. That codes out to E88.3. That's when they get really life-threatening metabolic disturbances that are due to either chemo or radiation. So we would assign that code, and then you would assign, if it's chemo, you would assign, it's an adverse reaction. So you'd use your E88.3 as the manifestation, and a T code to show it was due to anti-neoplastic drugs. And I think that's what you're gonna see. Have we coded enough that you know you gotta, I don't think you can find it under chemotherapy in the table of drugs. I think you have to go to anti-neoplastics. Okay.
In that situation, do we need to code a place since it's chemo's happening in the hospital? Do we need an external cause? No? Okay.
And then RT, if it's due to RT, of course, you're going to have that Y84.2 reaction abnormal to or following. All of this, don't forget, because you're thinking as you're coding along, you're going, well, I've coded admission for chemo. Don't forget you have a procedure code for chemo, radiation, and immunotherapy. So just because you set it up in the diagnosis, you still have to code it in the procedures. Okay.